Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uh, we have eyes and we see with these eyes. But everything that we see is on the outside. We have smell and we smell with our nose. But everything we smell is outside of us. We have the sense of touch and we can touch things. But everything that we touch is outside of us. Everything that we hear is outside of us. Every step that we take where our foot lands is outside of us. All of these things that we smell, see, hear, touch, walk on, all of these outside scenes have form. And we watch this form. But there is another world, and this other world is inside of us. All of the things that we see outside as form are seen inside of us as shadows. And to begin to understand that connection between what's outside, what's inside, what is fictional, what is illusory, and what is real, takes progress on the road levels of consciousness within us. For most people, the thought process as to thinking about what we see and how the mind sees these same things as shadows and how these things go on in the mind, it doesn't go on. They accept what they see, they react to what they see, and they draw conclusions from what they see. Now, inside, in addition to the shadows of the visual scenes, are qualities. And these qualities consist of arrogance, jealousy, hastiness, anger, and so on. And there are also another set of qualities that are inside, but they're much more difficult to discover. And these are the divine qualities. This world that's inside of us is called the mind. And the mind interprets what goes on outside. And it draws conclusions. Without wisdom, all of the conclusions that are drawn are inappropriate. Without wisdom, it's impossible to draw correct conclusions. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get things done in the world. That doesn't mean you can't be successful in the world. That doesn't mean you can't make headway in the world. But it means that as far as truth is concerned, you're not drawing conclusions that are truthful. You're just drawing conclusions from the various elemental forces that you see and the various elemental forces that you deal with and the various elemental forces that you react with. Now, there are lots of psychologists who try to explain what's going on within the mind of man. And they try to explain that certain traumatic events within certain people's lives bring them to conclusions as to everything that's going on with them that are not necessarily correct. For instance, if you're beat often as a child and you know that there's a lot of pain that's coming through these beatings and it comes often, you may, as a child, at the time of the beating, replace the pain with anger. And you just may develop anger within you. And this anger becomes that which is the place of the operation within you of everything that you do. And so every instance, every interaction that you have with people automatically has anger in it because you've established anger as your baseline. Doctors use the word baseline to describe where you are at the moment in time and where they began with you. And then you go up and down on that baseline. So if anger is your baseline, it's very difficult to move to another state, to another state of being. The mind inside of us creates all of these visions, and these visions are constantly changing. And like on the outside, the animals eat each other. These various visions that we have in our mind are also eating each other and destroying each other. So visions come in and visions disappear, and visions transform, and visions are taken away. It's a constant process that's going on. So there's no real stability. There's just constant change. But if there is a baseline of anger behind this constant change, no matter what we bring to someone else's purview, no matter what we bring into their line of sight, no matter what we bring into their vision, they see it with anger because anger has been established in their youth and they've held on to it. And so everything they see, they react to with anger. So, what is it that can be done to do away with that? Well, we have to understand that Maya takes on many forms and it keeps changing. And it is constantly in a state of change and destruction. It doesn't have any stability to it, and it doesn't have God's qualities to it. When it sees the light, it becomes afraid because it has become so used to its baseline, which is anger, or one of the qualities that are abhorrent, that when the qualities of truth come into being, when the qualities of light come before it, it looks and it runs away. So you might find that someone who you deal with, who when you bring some light into their life, they'll run from you. They don't want to know the truth. They have established their truth. And that truth, unfortunately, has been established in a way that's other than reality. It has to do with their own perception of things that they want to maintain and sustain. And it's difficult when these people maintain and sustain negative qualities. Negative qualities become that which they hold on to, that which they grasp onto, and that which becomes their life. Now, these negative qualities may only apply to certain people in their lives, but it's very difficult for them to let go of it. Change is something that needs to come about in each of us. And just because we have seen people change, and just because we have changed, doesn't mean it's something that others can do. It depends on the depth of the trauma that they went through that has made them the way they are. It depends on the depth of the emotional upheaval that they went through that's made them the way they are. And sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. And we need to understand that there are situations that only God can intervene on, and only God can change. So sometimes the only thing that we have as a weapon towards bringing about change in people who have hardened themselves is to pray that Allah's intervention occurs, and Allah, in His mercy, brings about a change within them. Controlling the mind is a very difficult thing, and most people are controlled by the mind as opposed to the mind controlling them. And the mind is not our friend. The mind is elemental. The mind is limited to the section of intellect, which is as high as animals go. So the mind often reacts as animals react, and that is protecting their boundaries, protecting their borders, protecting their self-interest, protecting themselves, and creating a situation where they believe they have to protect, even though there may be nothing to protect. Even though you may be looking to help them, they're looking to protect themselves. So all of a sudden, your attempt to help becomes to them an attack. Your attempt to bring something about other than their present state becomes an attack. And they have to, in their heads, react to you violently and react to your attempt to assist violently. It's very interesting that when Muhammad was 4 years old, he was being taken care of by a nursemaid. But God sent intervention into his life. He sent the angel Gabriel and the angel Michael to Muhammad to cut open his chest and to go to his gallbladder and remove the bile within him. Now, this is representative of Satan's qualities. So God sent the angels to Muhammad to take out from him the satanic qualities. So when I said before that there are times when what you have to do is look for intervention, this is essentially what happened with the prophet. There was intervention on his behalf to take away the bile, to take away these evil qualities, to remove them. And when they were removed, certain things happened to him. Differences were removed from him. The religions were removed from him. Mine and yours were removed from him. The egocentric self was removed from him. The need to make himself more important at the expense of everybody else was removed from him. I was giving a talk in Florida. It's about 15, 20 years ago. And I was giving a series of talks. And the next day, a little boy came up to me and gave me a picture that he had drawn. And it was a picture of a heart with an angel flying next to the heart. And the angel had a number 2 pencil with an eraser on it. And in the heart was a gun. And the angel was erasing the gun with the eraser at the end of the pencil. Everybody has that gun in their heart. And these are the satanic qualities. And they need to be erased. They need to be taken care of. And unless someone begins to understand that this transformation has to go on, nothing's going to happen. And the problem is that this intention for transformation has to happen in the person who's going to be transformed. You can't have the intention for them unless you reach the status of a sheikh, unless you reach the status of having a direct connection to divinity, and then you take this divinity and you apply it to that person. Divinity will alter the gun in the heart. Divinity will do away with the bile in the person. Divinity will do away with the qualities that are abhorrent. That light, when it's strong enough, will make the abhorrent qualities run, because those qualities are afraid of the light, they're afraid of the truth, they're afraid of reality, and they'll leave the person. But this in the Catholics call it exorcism. They go to great lengths to try to change people who are hard-hearted. There are a number of books that are written about people who don't want to change, and some of them even go and put on a front that they do want to change. They go to see psychologists, they go to see psychiatrists, but they lie. They're there for no purpose. They're just there to maybe satisfy somebody else's whim. But this is a difficult thing to do. And we have to have extreme patience if we're working at it. And we often need professional help in order to make it happen. Somebody who's dealt with the inability of people to become soft. Um, Somebody who's dealt with the inability of people to open up towards other. Somebody who's dealt with people whose emotions are so brittle and so scarred and so hard that anything that's done to try and assist them, they react to in a very negative way. And even things that go on in their lives, they will constantly react to in a negative way because they create mind scenarios that somehow um, begin to look to them like conspiracies against their best interest. And these things are hallucinations. And they do this constantly. Um, Somehow, what we've gone through individually has to be conveyed to somebody in our purview who needs to go through it. And we need to explain where we were and what took us from the place that we were into this new place. What took us from the place that we were and brought us to the place that we are now? And why is the place that we are now better than the place that we were? Anger and resentment and vengeance can drive somebody for their entire lives. Um, Look at what's going on in politics. Anger and resentment and vengeance drive politics like crazy. And you can get an awful lot of steam out of that. You can get an awful lot of steam out of anger. But to understand that what you're trying to do is get rid of the steam that produces and keeps producing that anger is hard for people to realize that letting go of that is what's going to create a human being, and holding on to that is going to maintain a monster, is going to maintain something that is other than human, is going to maintain an animal in human form. And this entire path is about going from animal to humankind. Now, it's hard enough trying to do this for ourselves, but to try and do this for others is really, really difficult. And sometimes it can be done, and often it involves getting kicked in the face or kicked in the body a lot of times without any results. Um, it's a difficult process. It's a difficult process to be involved in, and it's a difficult process to try and bring about a change in others. There are entire industries in this country that are trying to bring about change, and most of them can't because they aren't doing it in an appropriate way. What we can do, and all that we can do, is love. And we can love in an unconditional way and continuously love in an unconditional way so that the person that is outside who we're trying to help finally feels comfortable enough to relax within our presence. One of the things that the Sheikh did was he was constantly in a state of love. He was constantly emitting that love energy. So being in his presence became a sanctuary. Being in his presence removed you from the everyday difficulties of the world and brought you into a state where love was paramount. And that love was so strong that it entered into you and changed your vibration towards love. Now, of course, you had to have the intention to do this, and you had to maintain this intention. And it's only through your intention and his intention that this occurred. So there has to be some intention on behalf of the other party. And you have to be able to induce this intention for some reason. But what we each have to do is we have to maintain this love vibration and continue to emit this love vibration. Two things happen when we do that. As we continue to emit the love vibration, we become more content, we become more peaceful, we become more tolerant, and we become capable of accepting more abuse. As we can accept abuse, we can then alter and change what's going on. But if we react to abuse, if our love is not strong enough to accept abuse, if abuse comes towards us, and as soon as we feel abuse, we abuse back, that's going to end that feeling of safety that we're trying to create. There's a story about my sheikh, and there was this man who used to come and scream at him regularly and abuse him verbally. And one of my sheikh's disciples saw him on the street and saw him with the man who was constantly abusing him, and he was giving him money. He was giving him charity. And he asked, "What are you?" After he walked away, he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I gave him charity because his constant screaming at me helped me focus on maintaining my love. And it also relieved me of karma because of the abuse. So I was paying him for the good deed he did for me." Imagine paying somebody who abuses you because they're helping you get stronger on your own path. Can we be that strong? Can we be that powerful? Uh, the purity of Gabriel and Michael came to the prophet, and that purity erased the abhorrent qualities from his being. And in erasing the abhorrent qualities, they also erased all of the differences. And they made him without attachment to the things that most men are attached to. It made him without blood ties. It made him without nationality. It made him without religion. It made him without attachment to any specific way. He loved all men equally, like God does. God doesn't have anger. God doesn't abuse people. God is worshiped by many different nationalities in many different ways. But God's throne is peace. God's throne is contentment. God's throne is equanimity. He doesn't get upset. He doesn't get pushed one way or the other. He just does his duty. He works towards the assistance and the maintenance and sustenance of his creation. And he does that as a duty, and he continues to do that. We need to become more and more pure. We should never believe that we are at the point that we have reached the point of our purity. The mind is constantly trying to take us to the satanic qualities and to hold us in place within the satanic qualities. Well, we have to come to the point where we control the mind as opposed to the mind controlling us, and that we bring to the mind the transcendent qualities, the elevated qualities, the divine qualities. What does it mean to bring divinity to the mind? It means to bring unlimited compassion. It means to bring unlimited mercy. It means to bring unlimited justice to the mind. And this makes the mind tremble because the mind has its own set of parameters, and they have to do with prejudice. And they're all prejudiced towards a certain vision that the mind has of you and how it's trying to keep you in that place. And if you can bring characteristics that are opposite to that vision, the mind becomes frightened and the mind runs. The mind runs from light. And when that happens, when you can bring yourself to the point that you have taken the mind to the place where it no longer holds you in place, you've become free. And if you can enter this state of freedom, then you can enter into the world of the souls. You can begin to enter into the world of truth and reality. Now, remember, we're here for a limited amount of time. And the ones who hold on to the world as if it were real, and the ones whose emotions are very, very strong, don't believe there's any end to what's going on. And they don't see any reality other than the form that they look at. They don't understand the reality that's going on inside of them. They don't understand the divine qualities that exist, that have an eternal nature to them and are much stronger and much more powerful than all of the visions and all of the sense attractions that we know. In the Tamil uh, uh, mythology, they have what they call the small pleasures and the large pleasures. The small pleasures are the sexual arts, the visual arts, and all of the things that come from interaction with the elemental. And for most people, their life is this interaction with the elemental. There's no understanding that there is a life beyond the interaction with the elemental. But then there are the sublime pleasures. The sublime pleasures are understanding, imbibing, and acting out the qualities of Allah. Imagine. Allah is called Rahman and Rahim, mercy and compassion. And in his mercy and compassion, he has allowed man to feel mercy and compassion. He has allowed man to understand his nature and participate in his nature. And by participating in godly nature, we become godly. So Allah has created man so that man can come into God's image. To do this, man has to travel over the ocean of illusion, the jungle of illusion, the desert of illusion. And the mind is this ocean of illusion. The mind is this desert of illusion. This mind is this jungle of illusion. Now, the mind is magnetic in its nature. And the question is, what is it that it is magnetic to? What does it pull in? It pulls in egocentrism. It pulls in uh, trying to make oneself better than others. It's magnetic to having differences. So if we are going to escape from the mind, we have to give up all of the parts of us that are magnetized to what the mind pulls in. So if we can't give up our differences, our mind will attract every difference and keep us glued to differences. If we can't give up anger, our mind is magnetized to anger, will pull us into it, and will keep us in a state of anger. If our mind, if we don't understand that, then we can never remove ourselves from our mind, and we can never cut ourselves off from being involved in the lower animalistic level of being. So the magnetism of the mind pulls that level of being into us and increases it and makes it more and more and more. And unless we realize that, we are not going to be able to escape from this mind. The only way we're going to get away is if we give it up voluntarily. And we have to give it up ourselves by becoming cognizant of it. We have to analyze ourselves. And we have to make sure that every one of the qualities that are satanic are gone from us, that we have become pure, that the water of God's grace through Michael, the angel, flows through us and cleanses us of all of that which is other than divine. So we are, each of us, taking this path towards divinity. We are taking this path towards understanding that which is eternal. And as we become closer to that, our ability to connect with those who are far from that becomes greater, because our purity is such that it becomes strong enough to interact with the essence of others and change the essence of others. There was a vibration that came from the Sheikh that changed people. He didn't have to say anything. You sat with him and a change occurred. You sat with him and there was an alteration in being. If we're going to help others, we have to become that strong, or we have to take someone to a sheikh and let him do it. But the way it's going to get done is through an interaction that's so powerful with reality that it brings about cognizance of the fact that there's a difference between the abhorrent qualities and the divine qualities. And when that begins to be understood, then change begins to happen. And we have to pray that that change occurs for each and every one of us, and that change occurs for all of those who we interact with. May Allah allow it. May He bring it so that it is so. May He allow change to occur. May He allow mercy to enter all men. May He allow justice to enter all men. May He allow compassion to enter all men. May He do away with all of the differences. that separate us from each other, so that the unity of mankind will understand the truth of their being, and there will be peace among all men and peace in this world. Amin, Amin. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.